So for our rose, we'll need red or whatever color you'd like to use for the petals, some brown yarn for the dirt, and then I'm using this off-white color for the vase. You'll also need a 5.5 millimeter hook, a pair of scissors, a stitch marker or a bobby pin, and a yarn needle to close it up at the very end. So starting with the red yarn, I'm going to start by making a slip knot. And I'm going to chain 2. Now you have the option to also start with a magic circle, but for this yarn it's a lot easier for me to start with a chain of 2 and then use that very first chain as my magic circle. So I'm going to start with 6 single crochet into that first chain. So we have our 6 single crochet here. Now normally for round 2 we would go under the next stitch like that and start to make our single crochet, but for this rose we're actually gonna just be working into the front loop. But before we do that, take your stitch marker or bobby pin and mark the back loop, so the one that we are not working into, because we're going to be working into the back loop in the next round. So I marked the back loop and I'm going to push my hook into the front loop only and make 1 single crochet. And then I'm going to make 3 double crochet into the same front loop. So to double crochet, you yarn over, go through that loop, yarn over, pull through. You have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through the first 2, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2. That's 1 double crochet. Make 2 more into that same space, so that same front loop. And now we're going to end with 1 single crochet into the same front loop, the very same space. And that's 1 petal. So in the next stitch, we're just going to go into the front loop and make a slip stitch. And we're going to repeat this 2 more times. So go into the next front loop only, make 1 single crochet, make 3 double crochet into the same space, and 1 more single crochet into the same front loop. So that's our second petal. Into the next front loop, you're going to make a slip stitch, and then we'll make our last petal, go into the next front loop, make 1 single crochet, 3 double crochet into the same space, and 1 single crochet into the same front loop. And then in our last stitch, we're just going to make a slip stitch into the next front loop. And here we should have 3 petals for round 2. And at this point, you can just gently tighten up the hole in the center. Do not pull too hard because you don't want your yarn to snap. Just super, super gently tug on that. And now for round 3, we're going to flip this over and go back to where we placed our stitch marker. We're actually going to push our hook through that same back loop where our stitch marker is. So I just push my hook through there. I'm going to take out my stitch marker and make 1 single crochet. Grab your stitch marker and mark that as your first single crochet. And then make another single crochet into the same back loop that you just worked into. So we're making an increase. That's 2 single crochet in the same loop. And now we're going to be working into the remaining 5 back loops. And we're going to be making an increase in each loop. So we're going to be making 2 single crochet into each back loop. So you can just flip the petals down so you can see the back loop more clearly. And just make sure you're placing 2 single crochet stitches into each loop. So once you've made 2 single crochet stitches into each back loop, you should be left with 12 single crochet stitches. So make sure you have 12 stitches all around. And now I'm going to take out my stitch marker. And just like we did before, I'm going to just place it into the back loop only, because we'll be working into that later. But for this next round, we're going to make 6 petals. So go into the front loop of that first single crochet stitch and make your petal. So 1 single crochet, 3 double crochet into the same loop, and 1 single crochet into that same loop. And now in the next stitch, we're going to make our slip stitch in the front loop only. And then go into the next stitch and continue making your petal. So go into the next front loop and repeat 1 single crochet, 3 double crochet, and 1 single crochet into that same front loop. And then slip stitch in the next stitch. Repeat this until you have 6 petals for round 3. So I just completed my 6 petals all the way around. Now I have 1 stitch left. That was my last stitch of the previous round, right before the first petal. So I'm just going to slip stitch into that front loop only, just like we've been doing after each petal. So this is what you should have so far. So now for the next round, just flip your petals down, locate your stitch marker or bobby pin, and push your hook through that back loop. That's where our first single crochet is going to go. So I'm just going to take out my bobby pin and complete that single crochet. And then I'm going to return my bobby pin to that first single crochet so I know where I started. And now I'm just going to be working into the back loops. So once you know where that first single crochet is, it's pretty easy to see where the rest of the back loops are. Just flip your petals down. And we just made 1 single crochet in the first back loop. In the next back loop, we're going to make 2 single crochet into the same loop. So that's an increase. And we're going to repeat that pattern. So into the next back loop, make 1 single crochet. And then in the next back loop, make 2 single crochet into the same loop. And just repeat that all the way around. So at the end of this round, you should have 18 single crochet stitches. Now for the next round, it's going to be another round of petals. So locate your first single crochet stitch right there and just move that stitch marker to the back loop only. And we'll make our first single crochet stitch in the front loop only of that same stitch. And this will be a petal stitch, so add your 3 double crochet stitches right next to those. And another single crochet in that same front loop. Now for this round, we're going to slip stitch into the next front loop. And again, we're going to slip stitch into the next front loop. So you're making 2 slip stitches in between your petals. So at the end of this round, you should still have 6 petals all around. So in the next stitch, just make your next petal. So for this round, you have 2 slip stitches in between each petal. So I'm slip stitching twice again into the next 2 front loops, and then continue making your petal stitch. You should make 6 petals in this round. So I just completed my last petal of this round. So we need to complete this round with the 2 slip stitches to keep it even. So in the next 2 stitches, I'm just going to go into the front loop like we've been doing and make those 2 slip stitches. And that's it for this round. So your rows should be looking like this so far. And we're going to make another round of increases. So for the next round, we're going to do the same thing, locate where your stitch marker is, and push your hook through the same space. And I'm going to take out my bobby pin, make my first single crochet, and then place that bobby pin back into that first single crochet. And now working into the back loops only like we've been doing, I'm going to make 1 single crochet into the next back loop. So I made 2 single crochet, and now into the third back loop, I'm going to make my increase. So 2 single crochet stitches into the same loop. And then we're going to repeat that pattern all around. So keep flipping your petals down so you can see your stitches. And keep working into the back loops. 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, and then 2 single crochet into the third back loop. Repeat that pattern all the way around till you have a total of 24 stitches. So once you've made those 24 stitches all the way around, we're going to work into our last row of petals. So I'm going to take out my stitch marker and just move it to the back loop of that first stitch. And we're actually going to start with a couple slip stitches because we want to space out the petals so that they are poking through the gaps right here, if that makes any sense. It's just a better spacing. So into the next stitch, I'm actually going to make a slip stitch into the next front loop only. And then in the next front loop, I'm going to make another slip stitch. And then I'll start my petal in the next front loop. All right, so I just completed that petal. So for this round, we're going to make 3 slip stitches in between our petals. So go into the next front loop, make 1 slip stitch, go into the next front loop, make another slip stitch, and then in the third front loop, make 1 more slip stitch. So after you've made 3 slip stitches, we're going to make our petal in the next front loop. And just repeat that all the way around. And again, you should have made 6 petals in this round. So I just made my 6 petals in that last round. So now I'm going to end with a slip stitch. Remember we started with those 2 slip stitches? I'm going to end with 1 slip stitch in the last front loop. And that's it for the petals. So now we're going to end with a row of increases, and we're going to do this just like we've been doing for all the last ones. So you're going to flip your petals back, locate your stitch marker, push your hook through that back loop, take your stitch marker out, make your first single crochet. Oh, there we go. And then I'm going to mark that first single crochet. And now for this round, we're going to make, we just made 1 single crochet in the first stitch. We're going to make another single crochet in the next back loop, another single crochet in the next back loop, and then in the 4th back loop, we're going to make our increase. So 2 single crochet in the next back loop. So the pattern is 3 single crochet, increase, single crochet, single crochet, single crochet, increase in the 4th stitch. And just repeat that pattern all the way around until you have a total of 30 stitches. So once you have your 30 stitches, we are done with the red yarn. So I'm going to snip the yarn. It doesn't have to be too long. And I'm not going to pull this all the way through, just a little bit up so I don't lose my place. And we're going to color change to the brown yarn or whatever color you're using for the dirt. So to color change, I like to push my hook. You see where the yarn is coming out of? It through the stitch right there. I like to push my hook through, down through the stitch, through those 2 loops. And I'm just going to pull my brown yarn through the stitch like this and just pull on the tail a little bit to give yourself some slack. And at this point you can also pull on your red yarn tail and pull that loop through. So now you have these 2 yarn tails hanging down, and your brown yarn is your working yarn on your hook. So now you're going to go through where your stitch marker is, and that's going to be your first single crochet. So you can put your stitch marker to the side, and for this round we're going to start with 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet in the next stitch, single crochet in the next stitch, 1 single crochet in the 4th stitch, and then in the 5th stitch we're going to make our increase. And we're going to repeat that pattern all the way around our rows. So 4 single crochet stitches and then an increase in the 5th stitch. So once you've made your 36 stitches all the way around, I'm actually going to take my 2 yarn tails from earlier and I'm just going to double knot them so that they don't come apart. And at this point you can snip your brown yarn. We're going to color change to the vase color. Okay, so I'm gonna color change the same way I did before. So I'm gonna push my hook through the same space that the yarn is coming out of. So through the top of the stitch, pointing downwards. You should go through those 2 loops right there. And I'm gonna pull my yarn through there. And from here, just pull on your yarn tail to give you a little bit of slack, and pull on the brown tail as well. So you can move those 2 yarn tails out of the way, and now the white yarn, or whatever vase color you're using, is your working yarn. So I'm going to start by just placing 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way around. So once you've completed that last round, it's going to start to look something like this. Now for the next round, we're going to make the rim around the top of the vase. So first I'm going to tie these 2 yarn tails together that we cut at the beginning so that they don't come undone. Now for the next round, we're going to be working into the front loops only. So I recommend grabbing your stitch marker and placing it in the back loop of the first single crochet. And then with your working yarn, just make your first single crochet into the front loop of the next stitch. And then if it helps, grab another stitch marker or bobby pin and just mark your first stitch. And now from here, you're just going to continue to place 1 single crochet in the front loop only for this round. So I just completed that round. If you look on the inside, it should look something like this. So the back loops of the previous round are still visible. That's what we're going to be working into next. So you can take out your stitch marker, the one from the first single crochet, and slip stitch into there. And now we're going to go into that very first back loop. So I placed a stitch marker in that first back loop. I'm going to push my hook through there. Then I'm going to take out my stitch marker and complete my single crochet. And then I'll return that stitch marker to the very first single crochet that we just made. And now I'm going to continue to make 1 single crochet in each of the back loops. And just continue that all the way around until you reach your stitch marker. Alright, so I just completed that round. So your rows should look something like this. Your last 2 rows are going to kind of sit on top of each other like this. Now at this point, I would count your stitches and make sure that you still have 36 stitches in total. So once you're sure that you still have 36 stitches, the next 7 rounds are just going to be 1 single crochet in each stitch all around. So we're not increasing anymore, we're just creating the body of the vase. So make 7 more rows of just 1 single crochet in each stitch. And once you've done that, I'll meet you back here to show you how to start closing it up. Alright, so once you've completed those few rows, the rows should start to get some body. So now we're going to start to close it up and also start to stuff the inside. So for this next round, we're going to be working into the back loops only, and this is going to give us kind of like a flat bottom. So this is your next stitch here, but we're just going to go on top of the stitch and just push your hook through that back loop and make our first single crochet. And now in the next back loops, we're going to do a decrease. So go under the next back loop, yarn over and pull through. And before we complete this single crochet, we're going to go through the next back loop, yarn over and pull through. So you should have 3 loops on your hook, and just yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And we're going to repeat that again. So make 1 single crochet in the next back loop, and then make your decrease. So go under the next back loop, yarn over, pull through, under the next back loop, yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So we're going to repeat that pattern, doing 1 single crochet and 1 decrease in the back loops only, all the way around. So once you've completed that, you're going to have a total of 24 stitches. And at this point, you can grab some fiber fill and start to stuff it just a little bit so that it has a little bit in it. And we're going to stuff it after our next 2 rows. So we only have 2 rows left, and we're going to stuff it after each row. So don't fill it up all the way, just a little bit. I'm just going to leave it there. So for the next row, we're going to repeat the same thing we just did, but we're going to be working into both loops. So we're just going to go under the stitch like normal and make 1 single crochet. Mark that off. And I'm actually going to be doing an invisible decrease. So instead of going through the back loops, I'll be going through the front loops. So go through the front loop of the next stitch, and then the front loop of the next stitch. Yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops, and yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops. So that's an invisible decrease using the front loops instead of the back loops. So make 1 single crochet, and then 1 invisible decrease. And just repeat that all the way around. So at the end of this round, you should have 16 stitches all the way around. So at this point, I'm just going to pull up a loop so I don't lose my place there, and start to stuff it. So make sure you break up the stuffing in small pieces like this, and then just push it down and stuff it as much as you'd like. Alright, so that's a good amount of stuffing for me. We can stuff it more after the last round if you need to. I'm going to take out my stitch marker, and the last thing I'm going to do is just make 8 invisible decreases all the way around. So I'm just going to go directly into the next front loop, and then under the next front loop, and complete that invisible decrease. And I'm going to mark that off, and just do that all the way around until you have 8 stitches left. So now that I have 8 stitches left, I'm going to take out my stitch marker, slip stitch into the next stitch, and I like to end my amigurumi with a chain 1, and then snip a tail long enough to sew the little hole closed. And then I just pull that yarn through. So you're left with this little hole at the end here. Feel your rows and see if you want to stuff it a little bit more. I'm going to stuff it just a tiny bit more. So once it's stuffed enough to your liking, we're going to close up this little hole. So you can thread your yarn needle. And then I like to go in and out of the front loops of the next few stitches. So I'm weaving in and out. And then just repeating that all around. And then you can just pull gently to close, and it should close up nicely like this. Now I'm going to brush off my little fuzzies, and I'm going to fasten off. The way I like to fasten off is just go under any stitch next to your yarn. Pull that yarn through, but not all the way. You want to be left with that little loop up there. Push your needle through there and just pull that yarn through to make a little knot. All right, perfect. And then I'm just going to hide this yarn tail into my rows. So just go through any stitch next to your yarn, pull that through, and then you can pull gently and snip. Brush that off. And the yarn tail should just spring back inside the rows. So that's the bottom, and this is what my rows looks like. If you guys like this tutorial, please let me know in the comments. Let me know what other kind of tutorials you'd like to see. If you make this, please show me on Instagram. Other than that, I will see you guys in the next tutorial. Bye.